Keep the music playing. Keep it going. Me too. Bring it down until I start speaking. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the story behind the story, 12th day of April 2012. 4/12/12. My goodness, what a day. You know, I just wonder anymore if it matters to talk about these things that are, to me, are incredibly important and incredibly groundbreaking, but I just don't know how many people are listening, and even if how many people care anymore. It's just it's a crazy world. I'm holding here in my hand, ladies and gentlemen, this really, it's like a heavyweight. It's so full of good paperwork and pictures and documents. Nearly 1,000 pages in heavy binding. It's author, researcher, historian David Irving book. His book, Hitler's War. The back cover, we see something very interesting. It just simply asks, what is real history? Simply, it is history that travels straight from history maker to document, and from the archives to the writer and his book, without political input and free of academic prejudices. It is history that cannot be bought off. And who has money, ladies and gentlemen? Who has money and influence and power to buy off the history books? I tell you, if you get one thing out of this show, you're going to talk about the plain truth, the history truths. One of the main incredible things in the Forbidden Secret, the book by Jonathan Gray, is the incredible, shall we say, yes, conspiracy to obfuscate and to lie and to erase history of Yahshua Christus, the Messiah. And again, the evidence that it's who he is known by these creatures, these subhuman excrement, because you see, they know he is Lord, and they do all their best to keep it from the masses for one reason and one reason only: for their power, their dominion, and their agenda to dethrone God himself. These people have literally no soul, ladies and gentlemen. They are the serpent. They are the children of the serpent. And I'm here to tell you, folks, that is the forbidden secret. That is the big story behind the story. Now, I'm saying, you know, people all the time now have been programmed, because of history. History books have been bought off, so people are flat out programmed to think one way, and that a certain group of people are God's chosen people, that they have every wish granted to them. I'm here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, there is no doubt whatsoever in my mind that this tribe, there's something in their DNA that is just flat out dangerous to all humanity, because it's demonic seed. These people don't have any conscience. They just flat out don't. I don't care what you call them. I call them Satanists. I call them the legions of Lucifer. I call them Edomites. I don't care what you call them. You just have to know who they are. What is real history? Well, I'll tell you something. You simply control history by not telling the truth, not telling the whole story. You just tell bits and pieces as you want to selectively put it out. Folks, Hitler's War is an incredible document because it really does set the stage honestly for not only what happened in the 1930s and the war years of 1940s. But ladies and gentlemen, it's telling you what the stage is for today. Today. And if you're not prepared for it, I'm telling you, it's going to catch you right upside the head, and you just flat out won't be able to survive. Because America is going down in a powerful, powerful way. Unless people wake up, and wake up quickly. Wake up right now and identify who they are. This book, as you open the pages of the book, the first section has Europe as it was in 1939, and the back of the cover, the back 2 pages of the book, has Europe 1942 to 1949. So there's subtle differences. It just basically shows where the Eastern Front was in 1942 and then where it ended up in 1945. Eastern Front, ladies and gentlemen. This is really the story of intrigue, of betrayal of the German people by a group called the Bolshevik Communist. Call them whatever you want. Again, I call them Edomite Satanists because, again, you just can't believe a word these people say. I don't even call them people. They're subhuman. I'm telling you, folks, this is an incredible part of World War II story. The 99.9% of Americans, I say, just don't even have a clue about it. So when you listen to this show today, I just, again, please advise you to go do your own homework, to read what I'm going to talk about today and share with you. There's an incredible website. I spent hours yesterday reviewing. I read the whole website posting. I'm not sure who the gentleman is that put this out there, but I'm telling you, you can tell he's not American. You can tell he's probably Polish. The website is simply Canada with a K, Canada.net, Canada.net. The Bolshevik terror, the Magdeburg Sting is what he calls it, 1906. Holy mackerel. Because when you compare what he has put together here with exactly the historical proofs of David Irving's book, Hitler's War, you've become to get a pretty doggone good estimation of why there were so many Jews in the concentration camps. It wasn't because they were Jews, ladies and gentlemen, not per se because of their religion. It's because they were subversive, powerful enemies of the Russian people. The Russian Christians and the German Christians, ladies and gentlemen. These were the most incredible, powerful war. They were perpetrators. They weren't just innocent victims. This whole story of the Warsaw ghettos, the Polish Jews. No. Not true. You gotta see the whole story. Why do you think, ladies and gentlemen, that Hitler signed an agreement? Originally, the Russians, the Soviets, were allies initially during the first few years of the war, 1939 to 1940. Why do you think there was an alliance between the Russians and the Germans? Why did they focus on Poland? Why did Poland fall so quickly? There's a lot of Polish jokes put out, that how quickly they were overrun by the Germans. Well, ladies and gentlemen, no. They were overrun more than ever on the eastern side by the Russians. You look at the map of Europe in 1939, you see Poland included a whole lot more land than it did post-World War II. Poland was much larger. The boundaries of Poland included much of what's now Lithuania, Latvia, Prussia. Poland was quite an empire. The history is clear from this. You can go back and double-check his sources, this author on Canada.net, and it's absolutely right, even though it's not taught in the history books. Poland defeated the Bolsheviks right around the turn of the century, and basically exiled them out of Europe. And we're talking Bolsheviks here being Zionists, ladies and gentlemen. They basically just ousted them out of Poland and kept them out. And the documentation shows that it's a Zionist / Bolshevik group funded heavily now by Wall Street that came and overthrew the Tsar of Russia. The Poles had no problem with Tsar, just the revolutionaries in eastern Poland that were trying to overthrow the Polish government. The Polish military stopped the revolution, and it was a bitter blow to Zionism and these subhuman animals. I'm telling you, they are just flat. The story of what went on in Poland is just it's just unbelievable. The atrocities put forth here, the pictures. You talk about Holocaust. Wow. Nobody's talking about this story in history books. When people, all David Irving did, let me just again read to you verbatim David Irving's, the dust cover of his book. In April 1977, the publishing world was startled by the appearance in London and New York of David Irving's first book, Hitler's War. It was unique in its method of describing a historic, indeed a millennial event, World War II, almost through the eyes of one of the dictators himself. What Hitler did not order or did not learn does not figure into this book, explains the author. The narrative of events unfolds in the precise sequence that Hitler himself became involved in them. Get that, ladies and gentlemen? This book explains the narrative of events, how they unfold in precise sequence. The first thing that the reader knows of a plot against Hitler's life is when Count von Stauffenberg's bomb explodes beneath a table at the Führer's headquarters. But this is an unusual technique, but it works. The book sold 25,000 copies in its first United Kingdom hardback edition, and it was often reprinted and translated into other languages. It became an approved reference work at West Point and Sandhurst, and it figures prominently in university libraries around the world because it quotes documents that other historians have failed to find. Now, listen up. In 1991, Focal Point, an imprint founded in 1980, published a new deluxe edition, updated and including The Warpath. The Warpath, the narrative of Hitler's pre-war years. And this because the reason why this became so wrong, you see, the war years, the war path, the pre-war years, it exposes the whole truth about these so-called self-styled Jews, these Edomites. And it's not, oh my goodness, it's not at all what the Holocaust stories want you to believe. But it's fact, ladies and gentlemen. It is absolutely factual. Quote, Mr. Irving's other publishers, other than Focal Point, had by then come under a systematic campaign of attack. On July 1992, the day after Mr. Irving returned from Moscow, he went to Moscow, ladies and gentlemen, and got original copies of documents from the Russians that were in their archives, right? He brought back from Moscow. You got to understand, Steve. The Red Army was first into Berlin to the headquarters, and they confiscated much of the papers, the documents of Hitler. A lot of the documents there were even destroyed by, again, the Bolsheviks or Edomites. They call themselves Jews, but they're flat out not. They are Khazarian, bloodthirsty, red members of the tribe of Edom, which is Esau, ladies and gentlemen. What are the things they brought back? The media knew this now, the controlled media, was the unpublished, never before seen in the West, diaries, plural, from Joseph Goebbels, propaganda minister. These were all in the former Soviet archives. This is 1992. Because of the truth coming out here, the reasons why Hitler had to eventually turn and attack and fight the Bolshevik Jews, the concerted attack began on this book, Hitler's War. Macmillan's, the publishing company, capitulated and secretly ordered all stocks of his books, this Hitler's War, burned. Libraries came under pressure to pull his books from their shelves. Not just in America, ladies and gentlemen, but Italian, French, Spanish, and Scandinavian publishers were prevailed upon not to release their editions of the book. However, the 1991 Focal Point edition incorporated all the latest archival finds, including the diaries of Hermann Göring and Hitler's notorious Dr. Morell. And for the first time, dramatic color photographs taken by Hitler's cameraman, Walter Frenz. This new edition is further updated with evidence including the long-lost Gestapo interrogations of Rudolf Hess's staff. Now, thank goodness, in private hands. And this is the most key, ladies and gentlemen, coded signals intercepted and broken by British code breakers. What is it that this group of controllers, this Edomite group of people that control the press, media, television, for the most part radio, what is it that they want to lie about and obfuscate and keep from getting hit? What is the real history? Well, the real history is their atrocities, the millions, yes, 66 plus million Christians massacred before World War II and even into the 1950s. This is the story behind the story of the century. As one of these Edomites warned me off, how stupid of you to expose yourself as a, quote, Jew-hating man. Oh, how stupid of me to talk about Khazars? How stupid of me to expose the truth? Because you label me a Jew-hating man? You start attacking me in every possible way because I tell the truth? I expose the big lie of who the Khazars are, that they come out of the dark, most incredibly evil source ever to blacken this planet. You call me a Jew-hating man because I'm a Christian and I stand for Jesus Christ and against Lucifer and his minions? So be it. The lines are drawn. The sword of truth is unsheathed. And on we go. Here is this, again, go to this website, Canada with a K, Canada.net. Incredible pictures, archival pictures, copyrighted pictures. I gotta share this as long as it takes to get this story out. I'm telling you, this is an amazing prologue, the Bolshevik terror. He begins by writing, quote, "There is a powerful lesson for the future. And ladies and gentlemen, we are building the future today, and everything we say and do, we build for the future. There's a powerful lesson for the future to know the real, comma, not the official history. We've been taught the so-called official history, or not taught it, but my goodness, the school curriculum, the textbooks, the religious dogma coming out of our seminaries. Oh, it's manufactured history, ladies and gentlemen. It's not real history at all. Real history, like Mr. Irving said, is simply history that cannot be bought, cannot be purchased, cannot be prostituted, cannot be bought off. To know the real, not the official history, is what this gentleman writes as well. Quote, "My grandfather used to say, history repeats itself, but you can't teach an old horse a new way home." Over the centuries, Polish mathematicians have influenced the course of history. Copernicus used mathematics to buttress his revolutionary heliocentric theory. 400 years later, Marian Rejewski, subsequently assisted by fellow mathematician cryptologist Jerzy Rozki and Henryk Zygalski, in December 1932, broke the German Enigma machine cipher, thus laying the foundations for Allies to win World War II. And they did it, ladies and gentlemen, by cracking. They had read the German Enigma ciphers. This program to know what the Germans were saying in code was a program called Ultra. And the Ultra program, ladies and gentlemen, was discovered, was invented by a Polish gentleman, a Polish mathematician. After the war, the Polish mathematician Stanislaw Ulam showed Edward Teller how to construct the practical hydrogen bomb. He says, "My maternal grandfather was murdered by the Zionist in uniforms of the UB department of MBP, which is a branch of the so-called NKVD in Poland. Now, there's this secret society. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bolsheviks actually called it Homeland Security. You see what I'm talking about here, folks? Oh my goodness. They had bottomless funding. They had the secrecy of this police force, this killing machine was incredible. My maternal grandfather was murdered in Poland between 1945 and 1953 by the branch of the NKVD. The NKVD later became the KGB of the Soviets during the Cold War. He was murdered in Soviet-occupied Poland for being a member of the Narodowe Sile Zabroczne, which is the NSJ, the Polish underground resistance organization during the Second World War. See, when the Soviet Union came in and occupied Poland at the end of World War II, they had a purge. And I tell you what, they killed millions of people. You got to understand what went on there. This is the incredible untold story with pictures and documentation. So even though the war ended, the underground, the Polish national underground, still kept fighting the Soviets as well as the Germans early. We'll come back with the total picture after these messages. Please stay tuned. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So much to talk about. So much more to talk about than we have a little 2 hours to do. So let's keep going. Okay. Again, I can't give you the name and author of this website. It's just, I've tried to find it. Maybe it's hidden somewhere. But listen, it's Canada, Canada.net. This is the prologue to the war, World War II, 1936. And again, the gentleman that's writing this, you can tell by the way he uses and just writes his English. It's a second language. It's not his primary language. What decided me, he says, what decided me to publish these pages is the shameless lie spitted out by the former Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Shamir, in an interview on September 8, 1989 for the Friday Jerusalem Post. Here's what Yitzhak Shamir said in this September 8th interview. Quote, Poles, people of Poland, Poles suck anti-Semitism with their mother's milk. This is something that is deeply embedded in their tradition, their mentality, like their loathing of Russia. The two things are not connected, of course. But that, too, is something very deep, just like their hatred of Am Yisrael. Okay, that's a huge, huge statement, ladies and gentlemen, accusing the Poles of being anti-Semitism, of being anti-Semites, and having a deep hatred of Am Yisrael, the Zionist ideal. Okay? Wow. Why are the Poles against this group of people? That's the big question. You see, they just don't grow up. But here Yitzhak Shamir wants the people to believe that Poles are programmed as kids, as babies on their mother's breast. Yeah. So here is my reply to Yitzhak. What do you know about Polish history? Question. May I remind you, the Kingdom of Poland was the only country in Europe that gave Jews a full status as citizens. And look what it's done to them. See, that's, look what's happened. I remind you, Kingdom of Poland was the only country in Europe that gave the Jews a full status of citizens. Correction. Jewish Zionists and Soviet Russia were and are connected. Of course it is. Hitler's overblown Holocaust was no different to what Soviet Jewish Zionists did to the Russian and Polish nations. Hitler's overblown Holocaust was no different to what Soviet Jewish Zionists did to Russia and Polish nations, just at least 20 times smaller. And here's what I want to just add to this, ladies and gentlemen, and what in the book, in the pages of Hitler's War, the book, and other proofs, Adolf Hitler had no idea, has zero idea what was happening to the Jewish people in these concentration camps, that this was absolutely the work of SS generals who were themselves Jewish. Now, when you hear that, most people will think this is crazy. It's not true. Because you see, you're so programmed in the Christian churches, in the media. You know, everything that's associated with Nazi Germany is anti-Semitic. The poor, hated, vagabond Jews. They pull that persecution card all the time. We're persecuted because we're the righteous ones. We're the bloodline of Jesus Christ. You know, we just are hated because we have the temple truth, see. Oh, no. There's a segment of the Edomite groups called Zionists that flat out will murder their own kind to get their own way. Absolutely part of this whole story is that understanding. You don't believe me? Look at George Soros, Edomite background. He takes on the synagogue when he needs to and leaves it alone when he doesn't need to. But George Soros, as a young man, turned in his fellow Jews in Hungary and sent them to the gas chambers because, you see, they were anti-Zionists. See the difference? They cleanse their own because either they embrace this apartheid structure of elitism or they are liquidated. They're heartless, even among their own people. So what do you know about Polish history, Mr. Yitzhak Shamir, you shameful sham? He continues. Hitler's overblown Holocaust is no different to what Soviet Jewish Zionists did to Russian and the Polish nations, just at least 20 times smaller. Ladies and gentlemen, listen up. Thesis documents, there's documentation of over 66 million Polish, Russian, Finlanders, Finnish people. The Holocaust there among the Christians were this is the story. It's just not told in the history books and the media. It's ignored. That's why this incredible website is so important. 66 million Christians, at least. He writes down, quote, now, quote, this is really, really, really strange. I completely have lost everything on my computer. I've just got a crash report. We're sorry. Your website had a problem and crashed. Tell me this is just accidental. Tell me this is normal. I don't believe it. Everything I do is monitored. My computers are completely messed with. Why do they not want this information coming out? Because I'll tell you, it's flat out. They just don't want people to know. Well, I'm going to have to reboot my computer. So while it reboots, we'll just try to go into because what I was going to read to you is, I mean, it's from the journals, eyewitnesses of what happened to these priests, the Christian people, the massacres. It's just they were lined up. You talk about mass graves, talk about crimes against humanity. These Christians and these sellouts. I mean, the lies put forth. Well done documentary. Well done documentary on the Katyn Forest massacre. The Polish army made a surrender agreement with the Russians. See, they were looking at annihilation with the Germans on the western side and the Russian army on the eastern side. So they made an article of surrender that with the Russians came in, and the officers of Polish army were summarily executed, tens of thousands. The terms of the surrender were ignored. Big bulldozers came in and just opened up mass pits, and one bullet to the back of the head, and they went right into the pit. There was a documentary of this done right at the end of World War II. There's a part of it posted on YouTube. It makes you just sick of what happened, the massacre. Bodies were exhumed, and goodness, absolute atrocity. See, nobody is talking about this. Why? Here's this, got my website back up for a little while. Let's see if I can read to it. It's called in history, non-history, it's called the Big Cleanup. He writes back, my reply to Yitzhak Shamir, quote, now Zionist IQ, a vulgar graffiti on the Am Yisrael Fakad, which is again Israel, the nation being established, Am Yisrael, Great Israel, Fakad, using the money extracted under false pretenses from the naive Americans, shifts now to the persecution and destruction of the Arabs and the Persians. Boy, isn't that the truth? The things are lining up. They wanted to destroy the Persians. Persians are, ladies and gentlemen, the nation of Iran, the sovereign country of Iran. And yes, indeed, Americans are naive. I would say not even naive. They're just hoodwinked and blinded and lied to so much. Americans are good people for the most part. Naive, absolutely capitalized naive. Yitzhak, he says, look back into your own checkered past. Jewish lies will never become history, regardless how often they are repeated. Why? The children of your victims will never forget. This guy's like an Anne Frank, except he's a Mr. Frank. He's Frank indeed. What follows on this website is a reminder of the historical truth that you do everything with lies. You replace truth with lies. Isn't that what the Bible tells us? Your father, the devil, was a liar and a murderer from the very beginning. And even the Mossad, the agency, by means of deception thou shalt wage war. Means of deception, oh, indeed, the serpent is very, very subtle, deceiving, and lying. He speaks with a forked tongue. Where do you think the American Indians got that term from? He speaks with forked tongue. He's a serpent. Serpents have forked tongues. They lie. Can't trust them. The big cleanup in 1936 to 1938, the Red Army itself had mass murders called the big cleanup. The majority of Red Army officers is a well-known historical fact. The motive is obscure. The same obscurity existed about the motive for the mass executions by Soviets of Polish prisoner of war officers in the year 1940. An amply documented case of mass graves. These officers in Cotton Woods near Smolensk, Poland, is also a well-known historical fact, which today's Russia has still to face. What follows will show you the connections and some world events leading to the Second World War. It will also show you the development of code-breaking methods by Polish military intelligence, which finally permitted the Allies, including the Soviets, to win the war, and the British to avoid learning the tongue of the Queen's forefathers. That's a huge statement right there, too. Learning the tongue of the Queen's forefathers. We see the British have usurped the throne. It's not the throne of Israel. It's the throne of the Edomites. That happened again during the William of Orange coup. Britain's Prime Minister Winston Churchill was to tell King George VI after the war, quote, it was thanks to Ultra, that's the Polish machine, that we won the war. The availability of Ultra was due in large part to the early Polish work that compromised the cipher of German Enigma machine. Despite this, on June 6, 1945, less than a month after the Allies' victory over Germany, a big slap in the face was delivered by the United States and England. Why? They didn't ask a single representative of the Polish army in exile. See, this is the story behind the story. There was a huge number of 75,000 Polish army volunteers that went into exile and underground, fought in the brigades with the Allies bled and died. Many survived. Veterans of the Battle of Britain. They were there at Monte Cassino, Arnhem, one bridge too far, many other battles of the Second World War. Not one representative of the Polish army in exile was invited to the London Victory Parade of 1946. No, indeed. No. Political, see. The Polish army were told they were to attend the Moscow Victory Parade instead. Why? Because, you see, Churchill and Truman made sure that the Poles were subjugated by the Soviets, the Bolshevik Jews. The Poles were supposed to attend the Moscow Victory Parade instead in red, Edomite Red Square. In addition to that, in England, every Polish war veteran were ordered to work on land as a peasant farmhand for 2 years just to get an exit visa. See, who's really in control of the United Kingdom? The City of London, you see. No other country had, they didn't do that to the French resistance fighters in occupied France, but they sure did it with the Poles that should have been honored and given medals for what they did. But no, they were forced to work 2 years there on land in Great Britain as farmhand peasants just to get an exit visa. Well, only 57 years later, Allies did officially acknowledge Polish contribution to ULTRA, the breaking of the German Enigma Code. First, for over 15 years, Allies were selling German stocks of wartime Enigma machines to the native third world countries without informing them, naturally, that the code of these devices was broken. My paternal grandfather, at his deathbed, gave me the 6 by 4.5 negatives of photographs you see here on this website. In his deathbed, he said, "Long time ago, I gave my word of honor to keep silent until my deathbed. Till my death. I think this time has come." When he finished, I had more questions than answers. He died before answering any of them. Later, I discovered among his personal things a thin notebook titled 1936. It's a personal code book. During the following 22 years, I spent hours in libraries searching for material to fill in the gaps. I interviewed some surviving veterans of the Polish Bolshevik War. Only German military intelligence officer, Brigadier Führer Walter Schellenberg, in his public memories, Captain Antoni Landowski and Major Severny Kuleska confirmed my grandfather's story. I was not surprised. The subject of the story was so secret that few were informed. The development of Polish counter-espionage and code-breaking capabilities was very vital to the survival of Poland, a country without any natural borders. During the so-called Polish Bolshevik War of 1918 to 1920, see, after the Bolsheviks took control of Russia, they came in and tried to, assimilate Poland. Most people don't know there was a 2-year war the Polish Bolshevik War. And the Poles were successful. They were powerfully successful. So the code-breaking efforts saved Poland during this war for the next 22 years, kept them from being overrun by the Bolsheviks, which are, again, 78% Zionist Jews. See, ladies and gentlemen? In 1944, with generous material and political assistance from the United States, Bolsheviks overran Poland and overstayed their welcome 46 years. After 1990, when the so-called Russian Soviet Union disbanded, the red Bolshevik flags were simply replaced by the red roofs of Pizza Hut. My grandfather was right. History repeats itself. Come back, ladies and gentlemen. Top of the hour, we'll do a little bit of America at Jeopardy, because I'll tell you, the same group of Bolshevik funders, that's what I'm uncovered. The Department of Homeland Security, this secret Gestapo of 50,000 plus. These are, again, that's the new wave. The new wave, exactly what happened in Poland, is happening now. History, can it repeat itself or not? That's the question. Don't go away. Please come back. We're back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second hour of Story Behind the Story. Again, said it before, this is kind of our motto here on Story Behind the Story. We are fighting the war on error, not the bogus war on terror. There is no need for a Department of Homeland Security. There is no need for an NSA data collection center. There is no need for 450 million hollow point expanding bullets to be issued to Homeland Security. Those bullets are meant for Christian America, ladies and gentlemen, and you better wake up to that fact as I continue down in this path of history, realigning the true history, the real history that it's not bought off, it's not paid off. That's what we're doing today. Okay, top of the hour, let's do America in Jeopardy. Here is the answer, and then I'll see if you have the right question. He was the ultimate Zionist loan shark in 1904. Working for the firm of Kuhn Lubin Company, this individual financed the Japanese military with a loan of $200 million. Kuhn Lubin Company in the year 1904. That's the answer. What is the question? Well, simply, who is Jacob Schiff? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, remember this name, Jacob Schiff of Kuhn Lubin Company. Indeed, in 1904, Kuhn Lubin Company financed the Japanese military with a loan of $200 million. The reason for the funding? Japan was supposed to invade and deliver Russia, conquer the Tsar. The Tsar, ladies and gentlemen, you see, the hated enemy of the Zionists. $200 million didn't happen. Didn't make it happen. The Tsar defeated the Japanese. The Russo-Japanese War began in 1904. And again, out of that time era came the use of much of the modern ballistics, the machine guns, the smokeless powder of Alfred Nobel, an Edomite inventor, warmonger, and the development of even more powerful ways to wage war. Let us fast forward from 1904 to 1917. This again is right there, documented in the pages of this website, Canada.net. I'm telling you, it's exactly right on how Wall Street financed Adolf Hitler. This is all put out in this book as well. So he's right on point. 1917, Jacob Schiff again made sure that the banks were not permitted to lend money to Russia while he financed the Zionist self-defense groups in Russia. See, made sure that no official American government money was ever lent to the Russians to do what? Buy grain? Some, but not grain. Money to buy the modern armaments, the modern guns, the modern killing tools. Now this went, the better arms went to the Bolsheviks under Stalin and Lenin and Trotsky. Jacob Schiff financed Lenin and his Bolsheviks with $22 million in order to buy. This is what's so funny. The millions of dollars goes to buy these guns and weapons, bullets, you see. And it goes right back into the banksters' pockets. They control that armament industry as well. So Lenin received money and instructions from the Zionists in Europe as well. The Zionist Evangelidora Sumanson, through the Zionist Bolshevik lawyer Merkislav Kozlowski. It was this money, these arms, these explosive bombs and bullets that allowed Lenin to overthrow the Tsar of all Russia. And they did it, in the name of a better world for all, a better world for the poor, lonely little worker bees. On the night of March 23rd, 1917, there was this great Bolshevik celebration rally in New York's Carnegie Hall. A telegram of support from Jacob Schiff was read aloud. The telegram was reprinted on the next morning's New York Times. Schiff much later, tried to deny his involvement, but 30 years later, his grandson, John Schiff, admitted in the New York Journal American of 3rd February 1949 that the old man had sunk $20 million personally into the Bolshevik cause. Follow the money. October 12, 1917, exploiting the social and political conditions, Vladimir Lenin, protected by Yona Yakir. Boy, Yona Yakir, you talk about the ultimate Khazar. Yona Yakir's band of Mongolian mercenaries. This is again, I talk about a hit squad of mercenaries. They are the original, Marines. Deadly, powerfully well-skilled in the art of war and killing. Yona Yakir's band of Mongolian and Finnish mercenaries opens in Smolensky's Institute of Petrograd the so-called Military Revolutionary Committee, the MRC, which consisted of 18 commissars. This is the origins of the so-called NKVD, the KGB, ladies and gentlemen, the death squad, the Military Revolutionary Committee. It shows the connections of these 18 commissars. They're all Jewish Zionists, from Reuven Selman, and how they changed their names. The Benko, they changed their names. They take on new Russian-sounding names. Oh, my goodness. At the final battle, this terrorist gang, I mean, you talk about terrorists. You talk about how these Manchurian Khazars, they're terror. I mean, completely terror, from bombings to assassinations. Anybody that stood in the way, they were, boys, bam, they were quick. One bullet to the back of the head. So what became known as the Red Terror. They quickly came under attack, though, in October, by anti-communist, so-called white Russian forces. This is where the revolution really kicked force. Trotsky was made the Commissar of War for the entire Red Army. So anyway, I'm just giving the background history. The Commune Commissariat for Internal Affairs, CCIA, and the Extraordinary Commission, that's what they were called, CCIA, became known as the Cheka. Cheka was founded by these incredible terrorists. I mean, they're bloodthirsty. The atrocities are just amazing. It was founded officially on December 7th of 1917 in secrecy. This is the papers, the code papers that this gentleman's grandfather gave to him on his deathbed. The Cheka. The Zionist Moshe Uritsky, a man who would be proud to kill Christian officers with his bare hands, was its first commissar. Then Lenin appoints Felix Dzerzhinsky, a chairman of a committee, the V-Cheka. This is who organized and perpetuated the communist terror, the cleansing, 1917 until 1953. The technocrat of the new era, they called it the new era. The new order is born. The People's Commissioner for Internal Security of the Cheka applies himself to paralyze the subjugated humans of Eastern Europe with the most incredibly savage terror. You want to talk about world terrorism? This is 1917. It's where the whole image of the whole terrorism as a concept, modern times, began. It became from the Cheka. Cheka, ladies and gentlemen. Cheka was made up 64% rabid Jewish Zionists. The other 25% were simply Jews who had taken Russian names. The Cheka's main purpose, its primary purpose, was to terrorize any opposition by any Russian or Polish patriots or any in Eastern Europe who simply compromised the enemy classes. The story is verification after verification, story after story after story, documentation. The Cheka would often arrested whole family units, whole families, would torture the young children, the toddlers, torture the children before the eyes of their parents. They would strip the wives and torture the wives, cutting out their genitalia, etc., and their breasts before their husbands. This is what they did, ladies and gentlemen. You think this is not important to discuss and talk about? The Cheka, Zionist Bolsheviks, Bela Kun, whose real name was Aaron Kohn, Kohn, Rosa Zelmayachka, whose real name was Rose Zakind. They would take out Russian officers, politicians, army officers in barges into the Crimea. These barges were chock full, many as over 1,000. One barge documented 1,092 officers. Take these out in barges and sink them. They drown them in the bottom of the ocean. Czechish Mikhail Kitharov. Mikhail Kitharov. He was Chechen. His real name was Zederbaum. Was in charge of the drownings in these barges. The Zionist Cheka members, they perversely enjoyed torturing their victims. The Christian priests throughout Kherson, the city, were crucified. Ladies and gentlemen, those Romans, the Edomite Romans, had nothing on these people. All the priests were put on crosses, nailed onto crosses and crucified. Archbishop Andronikov in Perm had his eyes poked out and his ears and nose cut off. The Christians, they identified, they would often, I got to be graphic, but it's exactly documented here. They would tie their victims, they would pin their arms back with wires, cut a hole in their stomach, their lower stomach. They pull out a length of small intestine, sever it, nail it to the telegraph pole, and then whip the victim to run circles around the pole till the whole intestine become unraveled. This is what they did to the Christians, ladies and gentlemen. Guys, and I quote, the eyes of church dignitaries were poked out, their tongues cut off, and many were buried alive. The Bishop of Voronezh, the Christian bishop, was boiled alive in a big pot. Put him in this big pot, boil him up with water. Then the Christian monks of the church, revolvers at their heads, were forced to eat of the soup made. See, this is why I'm telling you, folks, when you talk about demonic manipulation, there is, everywhere you go into the satanic cults, they have a fetish of eating human flesh. In Kharkov, people were scalped. In Sarsin and Kamishin, hands were amputated with a dull saw. In Poltava and Kremchug, tens of thousands of victims were impaled and put on stakes. Again, that is exactly what Vlad the Impaler, the Edomite Prince of Wallachia, a.k.a. Count Dracul, did. Tens of thousands of people were impaled while still alive on stakes, and then the stakes were stuck into the ground. There's no, I mean, you just can't grab. There is no human decency in these people. And see, why is this not exposed? Why is not a documentary film done on this and this put on public education system? This is absolutely horrific. I admit it. We're talking 66 plus million Christians. And there were the pagans, the gypsies, the non-civilized pagans. They were never touched. Just the Christians. In Odessa, they were roasted alive in ovens, ripped to pieces. In Kiev, victims were placed in coffins. The higher you're standing in the Christian community, they would pull coffins up with decomposing bodies, and they were nailed with his dead body and buried alive. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't care what you say. This has no words to describe what they were doing to the Christians. And yet, those poor little guys in the concentration camps that were sent in the gas ovens, it pales in comparison to what was happening during these pre-World War II years. In Voronezh, the Christians were put into barrels with nails hammered to stick out on the inside, and the barrels were rolled down a hill. Oh, that's what kind of horrendous fiend would think of doing something like that? The Russian Zionist newspaper, Zhirikovskaya Tribuna, dateline August 24th, 1922, stated there in an article that Lenin had asked congregated rabbis, the rabbis came to Kremlin, the rabbis, if they were satisfied with the cruel execution manners of Christians. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. This is the proofs we're talking about here, these atrocities. In Moscow, Christian churches were destroyed and a synagogue with capacity for 2,000 was built during the so-called Red Terror. And it's called terror for a reason. Bolshevik means red, means Edom, which is red. During the Red Terror, not a single synagogue was destroyed or turned into a public toilet or storehouses happened to every Christian church. Not a single rabbi was crucified or tortured. Lists of those executed and tortured in this manner were published in the Cheka's weekly newspapers. The Cheka actually employed body counters. It can be proved, I can prove, that 1.7 million Christians were executed from 1918 to 1919. Another 1.7 million were murdered from January 1921 to April 1922. Among the names of the victims were bishops, professors, doctors, police, journalists, writers, military officers, workers, civil servants, nurses, farmers, and lawyers. They were all Christians. Without most of their leaders and the fact that the few left had no way to spread their ideas, see, they had no media access. You get that? You get, ladies and gentlemen, you get what's going on. Now, most of their leaders, and the fact that the few left had no way to spread their ideas. They had no media access. They had no radio show. They had no internet blogs. The Russian masses were incapable of counter-revolution against these Zionist terrorists. Subnote 1. 1975, the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution that designated Zionism, quote, a form of racism and racial discrimination. And within the context of the Israeli conflicts, Zionism is indeed viewed as a system that fosters apartheid and racism. But more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, it fosters terrorism. This is the father terrorism. You see what I'm getting at? I hope you do, ladies and gentlemen. People ask me all the time in my private discussions when I say, hey, who did 9/11? Israel did. The Mossad did. The Zionists. All synonyms. They all did it. That's who did it. Oh, please. Now, why would they want to attack poor little America? Israel's good. Israel's great. Israel's our friend. Oh, really? You don't know their history, then? You don't know their history of false flag. All you do is, when you read the history of what happened in the overflow of Russia, what happened in the Bolshevik overthrow, false flag after false flag after false flag after false flag event, all signed with an ulterior motive. September 11th did one thing and one thing only. It provided the expansion of Pax Israel like nothing else could have. What do you think not? Do you think the American public would stand by and not be brainwashed into occupying and invading Iraq and killing 1.6 million innocent Iraqi civilians? Do you think we would ever be stuck in a war in Afghanistan protecting the opium poppies there? Ladies and gentlemen, my goodness, please. I don't know what it will take to wake this country up. That we have been overthrown by these Edomites. Our media, our mainstream media is controlled by them. Yeah, how stupid of me to expose myself as a truth teller. Because being a Jew-hating man, according to this Edomite, is meaning you're a truth teller. Am I anti-Semitic? No. Shem, the Khazars are not of Shem. Israel, Jacob, is of Shem. So you can't be anti-Semite and exposing the Khazars. I'm anti-Khazarian. I'm anti-Edomite. You bet. Take it to the bank. I'm anti-Edomite. I am anti-Satan. I am anti-Lucifer. Hey, you know what? I'm a Christian, and I see what's going to be happening to the Christian majority of America in the not too distant future. Christ, better come quickly, my master. Messiah, listen up. We need help here. That's my prayer, and that's my plea from day one since I've uncovered all of this. Take a break, ladies and gentlemen. Take a few deep breaths. We'll be right back to wrap this up. Please stay tuned. Don't go away. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Lazar Moshevik Gaganovich. Picture of him on this website. Rosalie Zalkind, a.k.a. Rosa Zemilachka, took their names. These are, boy, you talk about prototypical Edomites. Black eyes, hook nose, absolute evil in their faces. Lazar Gaganovich, he's the one that is behind this mass destruction of the Christian monuments and churches, including the great Christian Cathedral of Christ the Savior in Moscow. There's pictures of this great Cathedral of Christ the Savior, and many incredible miracles happened there in the building of that great cathedral. There's a picture of him standing in the rubble of the cathedral, proclaiming, "Mother Russia is cast down. We have ripped away her skirts." Who was this Kaganovich, son of a bitch? Yeah, he was Joseph Stalin's brother-in-law, the brother of Stalin's Jewess wife. Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, listen up. He was absolutely the worst mass murderer in the recorded history of this planet. 66+ million Christians died under this man's hand, and yet you've never heard of him. I'll take a bet. Lazar Kaganovich, biggest SOB butcher ever to walk this planet, and you've never heard of him. My guess, he's probably got his LDS temple work done for him, though. My gut hurts, and yeah, I feel ill. I feel nauseous reviewing these documents. It's beyond my mind to think of the terror and torture these Christians of Eastern Europe went through under this man's hand. Oh, but what evidence do we have in the Western media? Back in the 1920s, the Edomites had not yet gained completely control of the mass media like they had in Russia. On September 18th, 1920, the Times admitted, quote, I quote, "The Soviet regime relies on brains, and more importantly, relies on the terrible Russian ignorance." You see, there is a pattern, a modus operandi of these demons, ladies and gentlemen. It is absolutely being replayed in America. These Edomites are really, they're not the majority. What would have ever happened if the 66 million Christians, had just woken up to what was being planned for them? Do you think they would just allow themselves to be crucified and tortured? The Times article, "The Soviet regime relies on their brains and the terrible Russian ignorance." In 1922, Victor Marsden of the British newspaper The Morning Post published the names of all 545 top Bolshevik administrations. 477 of them were Zionist Jews, ladies and gentlemen. Only 5.5%, were just plain Russians. No Christians, zero Christians. They were just, agnostic Russians. They weren't bloodline Edomites. 94.5%. Doesn't that tell you who's running it? Oh, they have some token evil men that are just agnostic atheists. That's okay. They'll use them, but no way is Christians going to be a part of this. Clara Sheridan in the New York World newspaper, December 13th, 1923, said, quote, "The communist leaders in Russia are Jews, and Mother Russia is entirely dominated by them. They are now in every town, in every government bureau, in the offices and the editorial staffs of all the newspapers. They drive away the Russians. They're responsible for the increasingly anti-Semitic attitude." End quote. Again, in 1913, you see, America was taken over financially by these Edomite banksters. David R. Francis, United States ambassador to Russia. Oh, this is the United States government ambassador, January 1918. This is, again, following the Bolshevik victories in October. This is a dispatch to Washington, D.C., quote, "The Bolshevik leaders here, the vast majority of whom are Jews, and 90% of whom are returned exiles." In other words, they were kicked out earlier because of their subversive activities and their Zionistic New World Order dogma. They're proponents of Jacob Frank, the Frankites, and Zabbatai Zvi, ladies and gentlemen, Sabbataians. That's who they were. They were exiled because of their activities, ladies and gentlemen. So here we have the U.S. ambassador in a post, in a dispatch. Quote, "Bolshevik leaders here are Jews, and 90% of them whom are returned exiles, quote, care little for Russia or any other country, but are internationalists. They are trying to start a worldwide social revolution." The Netherlands ambassador in Russia, Udendijk, made the same point just a few months later, writing, quote, "Unless Bolshevism is nipped in the bud immediately, quote, it is bound to spread in one form or another over Europe and the whole world, as it is organized and worked by Jews who have no nationality and whose one object is to destroy for their own ends the existing order of things." Oh. This is 1918, ladies and gentlemen. W. Bruce Lincoln, an American professor of Russian history, reports in, quote, "In the Ukraine, Jews made up over 80% of the rank-and-file Cheka agents." Why is this important? Because this was the Cheka agents that were massacring the Ukrainian Christians. Again, beginning as the Cheka, or Vcheka, the secret Soviet police was later known as the GPU, the NKVD, the MVD, and then finally the KGB. In 1920, British veteran journalist Robert Wilton offered this assessment, quote, "The whole record of Bolshevism in Russia is indelibly impressed with the stamp of alien invasion. The murder of the Tsar and his family, deliberately planned by Lenin and Sverdlov, who both came to Russia as paid agents of the German Rothschilds, and carried out by the Goleshkinin, Sermolotov, Safarov, Boykov, and Yurovsky, is, quote, the act not of the Russian people, but of these hostile Jewish invaders." Go, folks. Now, I wanted to talk also about this history that's, I got to post this on the website. This is and again, I don't like to use the word Jewish or Jew. Because it's really not descriptive totally. It's that of Edom, which is Edomites. When you see the term, again, the word Jew, it's a slang of the word Udom or Edom. Udom. There was no hard J in the original Greek and Hebrew. There was no Yah. There was Yah, or the J sound was added quite recently in the 1600s. But originally there was no Hoda. There was Edom, Hodom, or Jew. That became the name J. But it's Edom, the Jew. Word is Edom, Edomite, which is Esau, the lineage of the red killer. The 99-year British lease on the city called Hong Kong, the island of Formosa, expired back in July of 1997, and Red China to take over its land once again. Hundreds of newspaper stories and TV reports covered that event, but not a single one, surprise, surprise, revealed how England first gained control of Hong Kong. The truth of all this lies buried in the family history of one David Sassoon, a.k.a. the Rothschild of the Far East, and their monopoly over the opium trade. Raw opium, ladies and gentlemen. Raw opium, in case you don't understand, comes from the poppy, the opium poppy. And 90+% of the world's opium poppies are grown in Afghanistan. David Sassoon was born in Baghdad, Iran in the year 1792. His father, Saleh Sassoon, wealthy banker and the treasurer to Ahmed Pasha, the governor of Baghdad. See, Baghdad used to be part of the Iranian nation, but it split off and became Iraq later on, but Baghdad was part of ancient Persia. So the governor of Baghdad, he was the father, Saleh Sassoon, was basically the court Jew, the court banker, the most highly influential position for money. In 1829, Ahmed was overthrown, Ahmed Pasha, again overthrown because of the backstabbing, double-dealing of the Sassoon family, fled to exile in Bombay, India. This was the strategic trade route to India's interior and the gateway to the Far East. Gateway, you see, over the India trails to the opium markets of Afghanistan. In a brief time, the British government granted David Sassoon, monopoly rights to all manufactured silk, and most important of all, exclusive rights to the opium trade. Opium, ladies and gentlemen, simply the most addictive drug in the world. In the beginning, David Sassoon, the ultimate merchant of Babylon, the Babylonian Talmudists, David Sassoon, the Edomite, wanted to trade cotton cloth with China in exchange for tea in the 1800s, but the Chinese didn't want the cotton that Sassoon wanted to trade. No, the Chinese had silk. They didn't want cotton. However, they were willing to trade their tea for silver. Wait a minute. Instead of giving them silver, Sassoon found out that the Chinese, they loved this opium. They loved the opium highs, the drug produced. So Britain, you see, wanted the Chinese tea, but the ruling King dynasty didn't want anything that the Brits produced. They didn't have anything that they needed. The government of Queen Victoria at the time did not want to use up the country's reserves of gold or silver to buy tea. So what happened? The Queen forcibly began to extort and export opium in Indian subcontinent, including Pakistan at this time, all the way over into Afghanistan. That's all part of the Indian subcontinent that was controlled by Great Britain. Great Britain was the colonists. So the opium would be exchanged for tea in massive amounts. David Sassoon said, we need more opium. We need more opium. And so it was David Sassoon that forced the farmers in the region called Bengali. Bengali was later renamed Afghanistan. But Bengalis what began the farmers to stop farming food, and they were forced many times by torture and gunpoint to start growing opium poppies. There then David Sassoon became a member of the East India Company, a firm, again, owned and run by Edomites, so-called Jews, out of the city of London, which they controlled. The City of London financial district, the headquarters of Rothschild. So this was between the years 1831 and the year 1905. Opium became exclusively a, quote, Jewish business. Absolutely 100% controlled. The Jewish Encyclopedia of the year 1905 states that David Sassoon expanded his opium trade into China and into the Orient of Japan. His 8 sons, he placed his 8 sons in charge of the major opium exchanges in China. This is the beginnings of the underground criminal cartels called the Chinese Dragons. When you listen to people like, I don't even want to give his name out, the people that talk him out and say, well, look, I'm here with Forbes magazine. I'm an insider. I'm here to tell you that the Dragon families are good guys. Oh, we're going to overthrow the banks. It's just one division of organized crime wanting to get control over another, ladies and gentlemen. Between 1830, 1905, an absolute empire was formed by these Edomites, the Sassoon family and the sons. Of course, they shared their profits with Queen Victoria and the British government, of course. By the year 1880, the opium trade, there was 105,508 tons chests. This made the Sassoons the richest Edomites in the world, second only to the Rothschilds, the second richest family, Rothschilds and Sassoons. The Sassoons were now licensing opium dens by 1880 in each British occupied area, with large fees being collected by their Edomite Jewish agents. Many of these agents were the Chinese Edomite Jews of Kaifeng. These Jews had immigrated to China along the Silk Road hundreds of years ago and had intermarried with the Chinese. They bred with the Chinese natives. And so many of them looked entirely Chinese, but they were still practicing Jews. Thus were the perfect Chinese agents for the Sassoon purebred Jews. Folks, the entire trade was controlled, absolutely controlled by Jewish families only. Sassoon would never and never allow any other race to engage, even compete in this business of importing and exporting opium. 100% a strict Jewish monopoly. But these Sassoons were, all their agents were working under British passports with protection of the British government. The British monarchy, of course, the bloodlines, they are all the same. The Edomites honored them with privilege and knighthood. To this day, in the history books of the West and history books of Great Britain, especially, the Sassoons are honored as, quote, the great developers of India. But the source of their incredibly vast wealth is never mentioned, which is the destruction and impoverization of the massive population of China. And then came the opium wars, called the Boxer Rebellion. China's government eventually objected to the large-scale importation of their narcotics into the country. This all is done by a foreign power, the Edomites, you see. They began to say no. In 1839, the Manchu emperor, the Chinese emperor, ordered that this drug war be stopped. They had a war, the Opium Wars. The British Army began to be the paying mercenaries of the Sassoons. The bottom line to all this, ladies and gentlemen, we'll talk about it again and wrap it up tomorrow, is simply this. This is the grandfather of the pharmaceutical drugs we know today, the opiates that we sell today, prescribe in our pharmaceuticals. 78% of all drugs are opiate-based, ladies and gentlemen, absolutely including the antidepressants, the SSRI inhibitors, etc., etc. Demonic, ladies and gentlemen, the dragon indeed lives. You have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks for